Hello. This is going to be a continuation of the Chapter 5 tissue notes. You can find the first part in the Google Classroom playlist. This will be a public video, so it should be slightly easier to find. So we had left off going over simple columnar cells. So these simple columnar cells, single layer of column-like cells that we have mostly in places like your intestines and your stomach and your digestive system. A tissue that's somewhat similar to this is pseudostratified columnar epithelium. So pseudo, of course, means fake or false. So this is still a single layer of columnar cells. However, due to the location of the nuclei, it appears to be stratified as opposed to the simple columnar, where all of the nuclei are pretty much in line with each other. So these pseudostratified columnar cells have cilia, which are those organelles which are mobile. They are used in your respiratory system to sweep junk out of your lungs so you can cough it up. So you have these in your respiratory system. They often have goblet cells which can secrete mucus. These are unicellular exocrine glands, and we find this in your respiratory passages. So here we're backtracking a little bit to microvilli. Microvilli are a structure that we can find on simple columnar cells. So simple columnar cells have these microvilli. If you remember, we've had these in places like the intestine. You probably know that your intestines are highly folded to give a large surface area. So the inside, the lumen of your intestine has all of these folds. If we look at a single fold, we see this line of columnar cells. If we zoom in, these microvilli are these little projections, even increasing the surface area even more. So here we have those microvilli under electron microscope, so you can see how they would greatly increase that surface area. So our next tissue type is stratified squamous epithelial tissue. So you can see the stratified squamous epithelial tissue on my face right now. So this is many cell layers. The top layers are flat. They are the more squamous cells. The deeper cells tend to be more cuboidal. These cells can accumulate keratin. That is the protein that forms your fingernails. It is very tough. It is water resistant. So we have this in the outer layer of your skin. You have non-keratinized stratified squamous in your oral cavity, vagina, and anal canal. Next, we are going to talk about stratified cuboidal. So stratified cuboidal are going to be 2 or 3 cell layers thick. We're not going to have a whole bunch of layers like we have with the squamous. Here in our example, we only have 2 layers for this area. So these are going to be cube-shaped cells. They line ducts of the mammary gland, sweat gland, salivary glands, and the pancreas. So these are going to be associated with glands. Next, we have stratified squamous epithelial. So this is going to have a top layer of elongated columnar cells. The deeper layer is going to, again, be more cube-like, sort of like the stratified squamous. This is not a particularly common tissue, mainly found in part of the male urethra and in part of the pharynx at the back of your throat. Our last main type of epithelial tissue is going to be transitional epithelial. This tissue is best explained by explaining its main location, which is the urinary bladder. So as you're aware, your bladder changes size and shape depending on how full it is. So these cells need to be able to go through transitions. They need to be able to get stretched. So their shape is less defined because it depends on the pressures that they are undergoing. So they're cube-shaped and elongated cells, and that will vary. They line urinary bladder, ureters, and parts of the urethra. So now we are going to talk about glandular epithelial. This is tissue that is secreting or excreting substances. So these are cells that are specialized to produce and secrete substances. We have two broad classes. We can put them into endocrine glands are ductless. So these endocrine glands, they are going to secrete products directly to a blood capillary to be carried around your body. And exocrine gland is going to have a duct. It is going to have a passageway where material is going to travel out to somewhere. So we classify glands based on if they are single cell or multi-cell. So unicellular exocrine glands are, of course, just one cell. Common example of this is a goblet cell. So here we have goblet cells that are within a pseudostratified epithelial of the respiratory tract. So these goblet cells will secrete mucus. You can see they're sort of shaped like a wine glass. So they will secrete mucus, which can then cover this tissue. There are also multicellular exocrine glands. These are, of course, composed of many cells. Your sweat glands, salivary glands, mammary glands are going to be multicellular. There are simple and compound exocrine glands. Some of these are quite simple. Others have more and more branching. We then have these compound glands where there are many passageways joining up together. So these darker areas is the part that's doing the secreting. The lighter area in the illustration is the part that is the duct. So these are all exocrine glands because they all have a duct. So the last way that we are going to classify glandular epithelial is by the type of secretion that is produced, be that a fluid secretion, be that a cellular product, or be that a whole cell. So we're going to start with merocrine glands. They are going to secrete a fluid product. So your salivary glands or your sweat glands are merocrine glands. They are secreting mostly water with a few other ions, maybe some enzymes in there. Your apocrine glands are going to secrete cellular products. So they are going to secrete portions of cells which will break off to travel down the duct. So a mammary gland is an apocrine gland. There are large cellular components, many proteins and lipids that are going to be carried off in that glandular secretion. Lastly, we have holocrine glands. These are going to secrete whole cells. So your sebaceous glands, your oil glands associated with your hair follicles, they are going to secrete whole cells. So they're going to have fairly rapid cell division. Whole cells will break off and travel through the duct. So we are going to start talking about connective tissue today. We are going to finish connective tissue tomorrow. So connective tissue is the most abundant tissue type in your body. It spans everything from bone to blood, cartilage, tendon, ligament. It is a very broad class of tissue. Your connective tissue has a whole variety of different functions. No connective tissue does all of these functions, but it does things like bind structures, provide support and protection, serve as a framework, fill spaces, store fat, produce blood cells, protect against infection, help repair tissue damage. So there's a large variety of functions that are done by your connective tissue. To start giving you some examples, So your dense, regular connective tissue you have in your ligaments and your tendons. Here we are going to have just collagen fibers that are parallel to each other. In your areolar connective tissue, we are going to have some more random collagen fibers and some elastic fibers, and we are going to have some fibroblasts, some mast cells, or we can have a tissue like adipose, which is a fat tissue, where all we have are adipocytes, fat cells, and there's not much going on besides fat storage. So connective tissue has a few features in common. All connective tissue has a matrix. The matrix is the extracellular material that the cells are in. So blood, the matrix is plasma. Bone makes a mineral matrix. Your ligaments and tendons have this matrix of collagen fibers. Your connective tissues have varying degrees of vascularity. Some of these tissues have strong blood supplies. Some of these tissues don't have much of a blood supply. Your blood is a connective tissue. Your connective tissue has cells that usually can divide. Some of these cells have a great ability to divide. Others have a lesser ability to divide. Like your ligaments and tendons, if those are damaged, they have a sort of lesser ability. Other connective tissues have a very good ability to divide. So I'm sure you all remember the fill the matrix. All right, so we are going to go through a few common cell types that we have in connective tissue now. So the first cell type that we're going to talk about in connective tissue are fibroblasts. These are fixed cells, which means that they are not free to move around the body. They are one of the most common cell types in connective tissue. They are large, they are sort of star-shaped, and they produce fibers. I think they have a pretty great name. They blast out fibers. They are going to produce these large collagen and reticular and elastic fibers that are extracellular. So these fibers are produced and then pushed out of the cell or blasted out. So if we look at this dense, regular connective tissue, if you see these purple areas that are indicated, those are fibroblast nuclei. Most of the rest of this pink is just parallel collagen fibers. Most of that is matrix. It's outside of the cell. Your body, besides your epithelial tissue, most of the time your cells are not tightly packed. Your epithelial tissue will have cells which are directly touching. That's not the case for many of the other tissue types in your body. So here we have some fibroblasts that are being shown with fluorescent microscopy. We can see their blue nuclei. You can see the nice neon green cell bodies. All this negative black space, this is matrix. So these cells are not tightly packed. There is lots of matrix between them. So our next cell type we're going to talk about briefly are mast cells. These are fixed cells again. They release heparin and histamine. They have all of these receptors that antigens can bind to. These are what we call the masts. So if you see these under a microscope, they look very, very fuzzy because of all of these receptor masts that antigens can bind to. Next, we have the macrophage. This is a wandering cell. This is a cell of your immune system. It's phagocytotic, which means it can gobble up bacteria, break them down in a lysosome. They're important in the injury and infection prevention. So now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the fibers that are produced by these cells. So first we're going to talk about collagenous fibers, which can also just be called collagen fibers. So these are thick fibers. They are composed of the protein collagen. They are of great tensile strength. They are very hard to rupture, fortunately. Something like your Achilles, if I had to guess, it would take at least 500-600 pounds of sustained force to rupture that tendon. They are very strong. They are abundant in dense connective tissue. They hold structures together. We find these in great number in your tendons and ligaments. So again, we have this dense, regular connective tissue. Most of this pink is just collagen fibers that are parallel. These collagen fibers are of comparable strength to man-made ropes of the similar diameter. They truly are strong fibers. So our next type of fiber are reticular fibers. These are thin collagen fibers, so they are still made of the protein collagen. However, their structure is quite a bit different from the collagen fibers. These reticular fibers are highly branched. They're going to form supportive networks to hold other cells. So we will find these in different organs supporting the cells. Last type of fiber we're going to talk about are elastic fibers. These are bundles of microfibrils embedded in the protein elastin. So these fibers are branched, they're elastic, they're stretchy. We find these in your vocal cords, in your air passages. So I'm going to show you a video.
This is what the human vocal folds look like.
So as that narrator started to say, these are human vocal cords. This person has a scope that is down their mouth into their throat, and these are vocal cords. These are mostly elastin fibers. We can produce speech because we have these fibers, and our musculature is able to vary the tension on them to produce intelligible sound. So here we have these elastin fibers under microscope that have been stained. So you see how they're sort of wavy. It probably allows them to have some stretch. So to show the general scale of things, this is a loose areolar connective tissue, which is going to allow us to show the general scale of a few things. These large, thick yellow fibers that do not branch, these are collagen fibers. These much thinner fibers that have a few branches to them, they are elastic fibers. Up here, these highly branched fibers, these are reticular fibers. So we can see this, we have a blood vessel. So this is going to be simple squamous epithelial cells. Then we have these blood cells within. They are very small cells. We have these adipocytes. They are fat cells. And we have these fibroblasts, which are producing these fibers. So we're going to talk about two connective tissues and wrap up this video for today. So we're going to start with loose connective tissue. So loose connective tissue has many fibroblasts. It has a sort of fluid to gel-like matrix. the matrix, the material in between the cells isn't quite a fluid, it's not quite a gel, it's kind of in between there. There are collagen fibers that are very strong, but these collagen fibers run in many different directions. There are elastic fibers, which are stretchy. It binds skin to structures. The reason why your skin is free to move over your body is because of this loose connective tissue. Your strong collagen fibers are binding it to you, but it is still able to move. It's beneath most of your epithelial tissue. It has blood vessels that are nourishing nearby epithelial cells, so this is a vascular tissue. It does have a blood supply. We also have this between your muscles. Last tissue of today is your adipose tissue. Your adipose tissue is formed of just one cell type, adipocytes. Adipocytes you would know as fat cells. Your fat cells are sort of interesting in how simple they are. All they are is a cell membrane that is full of most of this white is just going to be triglyceride, which is lipid, it's fat. The little dark purpley regions, those are the cell nuclei. There's not a lot of organelles in these. They've got a nucleus, of course. They probably have some mitochondria. They're not doing a lot other than storing this fat. So your adipose tissue has a variety of functions. It cushions, it insulates, it stores fat, which before the modern era of supermarkets and fast food, it was important that humans were able to store calories on our bodies. We find this beneath the skin, behind your eyeballs, around your kidneys, around your heart. Hopefully not too much around your kidneys and around your heart. So that is the end of what we are going to cover today. Tomorrow we are going to go through and finish the rest of the connective tissues. So enjoy the rest of your day.